What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So everyone's kind of getting excited over seeing all these new Karazhan cards, but there's also a lot of really old cards that some of you guys might not have seen before. You know, there were a lot of cards that Blizzard ended up just straight up taking out of the game in the alpha phase and in the beta phase as well, and a lot of them are just really awesome, super broken, or just make no sense at all. So without further delay, let's dive into some cards that you might not have known ever existed. So our first card on this list is Autopecker 4000. Now this card is pretty sweet and explores a lot of really interesting design space. Now it's a little bit unclear how the card actually worked and how long you could mouse over it for until it triggered again and dealt more damage to you, but it's a little bit obvious why this card maybe didn't make it past the alpha phase. It seems like it just horribly punishes lag, or maybe playing on a computer that struggles to run Hearthstone, and don't even get us started on playing this card in mobile. It does have some interesting synergy to it. I guess it was just an interesting mechanic they tested out. I mean, in order to attack this card or to kill it or target it with spells, you do have to place your mouse over it, so I guess that's kind of the thing they were going for. In addition, you could also put it in the center of your board and then maybe play cards like Nosdormu to make it incredibly hard for your opponent to navigate their turn. You know, attacking with this card also hurts you too though, since you do have to mouse over it to attack with it. And if you reconsider your attack and decide to mouse over something else first, you'll take some extra damage there as well. We can definitely imagine games where this card is played and just kind of sits on the board. You know, still though, this is a very cool card, and it would be really cool to have some sort of a combo deck that forces the opponent to maybe mouse over this. Next up, we've got Adrenaline Rush. Now this card is just insanely busted. It allows Rogue to draw a variety of cards and just refill their hand, both enabling combos, and is incredibly powerful when comboed too. Rogue as a class is one that wants to draw cards a lot more than most, as they often kind of rely on combo finishes and synergies and just extra cards for tempo plays, and this card is essentially just a 1-mana Arcane Intellect. This card ensures that Rogue will pretty much always have access to all the cards and combo pieces they need to win the game. It's easy to see why this card was removed, as the power level of it is just way too high overall. There's just no situations where it's ever going to be a bad card in a deck like Miracle Rogue, even when you don't combo it. And when you do combo it, it just becomes the best card in the entire deck sometimes. If someone goes turn 1 coin Adrenaline Rush into another Adrenaline Rush, you kinda just lose the game on the spot sometimes, before you could even cast a spell. Adrenaline Rush is without a doubt one of the most powerful cards in Hearthstone's history, and it's great that it was actually removed from the game. Moving on, we have Death Wish. So imagine if you had a card that said, well, you just win the game. So what would the other 29 cards in your deck be? Well, it would probably just be, you know, ways to draw cards and to stall long enough to finally draw and then eventually cast that straight up win card to where you could win the game. And this is essentially what Death Wish was. Warrior could just play a bunch of removal and recycling, armor up a lot, stall the game, and then just kill your taunt and easily Death Wish you for 30 or more damage. Not only is this easier to accomplish than things like Leroy combos, it also costs a lot less mana, does a lot more damage, and has a lot less counterplay. There's no card that shreds armor, and it's hard to stick things on the board when your opponent's deck is 28 removal spells and 2 Death Wishes. Cards that just win the game by themselves usually get played with a lot of removal and are honestly just fantastic. I mean, just look at the point in the time when Elise Warrior was dominant, and Death Wish is a much better way to win the game than Elise ever could be. This card is honestly just insanely busted, which is of course why it was taken out of the game. Up next, it's Firebeard Herald. So this card is interesting to have on the list because it seems like a reasonably balanced card that Blizzard might have actually printed. And we already have lots of specific tech cards in the game that target certain decks or classes like Harrison Jones, Kazan Mystic, Sacrificial Pact, and many others, but in addition, it's not like this card is just incredibly busted. The stats are okay, it's maybe good against Freeze Mage, but that's pretty much it actually. It seems like Blizzard decided that they didn't entirely want to ruin Freeze Mage too much at the start, but then later on they printed cards like Kazan Mystic, which are honestly just as strong against it. I mean, besides, this doesn't really seem like a card that would see that much play, since it's only really good against one class, maybe even just one deck. I mean, maybe Blizzard thought this was too niche of a card and so decided just to never print it. Whatever the reason, Herald is still a pretty cool design, and we could definitely see cards immune to freezing or maybe other effects like it in the future. Moving on, we have Devouring Ooze. Another card that explored design space that didn't really make it into Hearthstone. Ooze got bigger and bigger as people lost games. While this is definitely a really cool and interesting idea, it does make it much harder for Hearthstone to actually become a competitive game. I mean, cards like Ooze essentially just attempt to even out a player's win rate to as close as 50% as they can be, since each loss you have before you cast Ooze makes you just more likely to win the next one. Additionally, Ooze is honestly kind of just free to play, since you don't have to play it in your deck before to actually get the effect, right? You can just stick it in after you randomly lose a bunch of games in a row. So yeah, what that would mean is that you could just play a deck without Ooze, and then if you happen to lose a bunch of games in a row, you just stick it in your deck, and all of a sudden you have a really overpowered minion for a game or two if you still happen to lose again. Punishing winning is fine for casual, kind of fun games, but it doesn't entirely make that much sense in a competitive card game, and honestly it's just a really weird mechanic because it's something that your opponent has pretty much no influence over. You know, it makes a lot more sense for a strictly casual game, for something like Mario Kart with their blue shell, where without things like that, the better player just wins every time. Still, Devouring Ooze is a pretty interesting design space, and it would still be interesting to see if Blizzard tested any other rewards that you would maybe get for being on a losing streak. Up next, we have Mega Blast. Now, Mega Blast isn't actually a standalone card. It actually used to be produced by Millhouse Manastorm, which at the time was a 2/2 creature and had the battle cry to put Mega Blast into your hand. Now, besides making Millhouse a lot more playable, Mega Blast also opens up a lot of cool design space, since most cards in Hearthstone that give you powerful spells like this actually cost a lot of mana. For example, you've got Archthief Rafam that gives you some really strong spells, but he costs 9 mana to play, and so does Ysera and other stuff like that. Millhouse Manastorm was a reasonable early game play that could maybe trade for other 2-drops in the best case scenario, but he also gave you a really powerful late game effect. Cards like this are obviously very strong, and Millhouse was probably so strong that he was changed into just a completely different card, but still it would be pretty nice if Blizzard could come up with some sort of mechanics that where maybe a cheap minion can transform or draw you a powerful late game option later on, since this is a mechanic that a lot of other card games have. Moving on, we have Penance. So this card is pretty similar to Firebeard Herald in that it's definitely a card that we could honestly just straight up see Blizzard printing. Penance is essentially just a slightly worse version of Bash, since armor has additional advantages for warrior and can also go past the health cap, but it's still a pretty reasonable card. I'm a little bit confused as to why this one didn't make it into the game. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be too strong, and it's not like this isn't an effect that Priest already gets, since it's both on Holy Fire and on Holy Nova. And it's not like we're getting high quality Priest cards in the first place instead of this. I mean, just look at the ones that we got in Karazhan. So this would honestly be a perfectly reasonable Priest card, and it would help Priest a lot in the early game too. Moreover, this card was replaced with Temple Enforcer, which is a lot less playable than Penance and Constructed, honestly. I mean, perhaps Blizzard decided that this card was just too good in the alpha phase, where minions were a lot weaker in general and Priest was already really powerful, and so they decided to take it out at the time. If so, you know, we could honestly expect to see this card get put back into the game sometime soon, because it is a pretty well-designed card. It's just a basic standard removal spell, and it's one that Priest sorely needs. So our final card on the list, and probably one of the coolest, it's Word Flipper X50. A 1-mana 0/3 creature, this card flips your opponent's screen upside down. Now this is a pretty hilarious effect, since of course it makes it harder for your opponent to just straight up play their turn. It's a little bit similar to like Nozdormu almost, except a lot more extreme and a lot more obnoxious. There are so many questions this card produces though, like does the second one flip the screen back? You know, is this card actually even good in the first place? At 1 mana it can't be that bad, right? What if your opponent's on an iPad and they could just flip their screen around or something? Now, I mean, this card definitely explores some unique design space, and there's a lot of similar effects that kind of could be like skill testing for your opponent in like a hilarious way. I mean, what about a card that hides all the minion stats so that the player has to remember what they were, or how much damage the minions have taken? I mean, either way, Word Flipper is pretty damn cool, but it's a little bit too gimmicky, and it's not that ridiculous that they decided not to go through with this mechanic, but it would be pretty awesome to see some more random, hilarious skill effects like this in the future. So those are some of the cards that have been taken out of the game. You know, what are your favorite cards among them? Definitely let us know in the comments below, and looks like that's gonna be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.